think my dogs were trying to jump in. All right, 3.2, please. Mr. Smith was so nice to go ahead and put some graph paper.
I started to, and people kept saying they all had it in their binders.
Well, there you go. Well, you're probably going to want graph paper today, especially if you filled up your toolkit. So, I'll be more clear with that. If your toolkit is full, get out a sheet of graph paper one way or another. There's graph paper right here in the resource stand. Graph paper always up here, literally multiple packs of it. So if it runs out, open a new pack. But there's like 2 open ones here. This is the nice stuff too, with the reinforced edges. And like, I give you guys the good stuff. Yeah, so you're gonna want some graph paper. If you're like me and drawing straight lines is a challenge, you might want a straight edge. A ruler, a note card, anything that has a straight edge on it might be beneficial for you. I'm bad at drawing straight lines. All right, and at the top of our notes, what are we going to do? Header. Give it a title. Today's date is what? 9. So 10/9/17 if we're being really accurate. And 2.3.2, guys, this is our last day in chapter 2. Well, last day of new content in chapter 2. And the title is more graph scaling, but like I'm gonna call this just graph work. Because we're going to do more than just scaling. My orientation's off. My K got rid of that. Alright, so I'm going to recenter my board while you guys check out the situation in 2.121. So look at problem 121 as your group. If you don't have your books out, get your books out. Get out any other resources you need. And then we'll bring it back together in just a couple minutes to see what you have figured out. Oh yeah, you guys have to finish the outsiders.
I won't be able to finish it. No. Why are people
So, what do we see here? Who can summarize what's going on for those of us that got a slower start than other people? Who knows what's going on? We should have set up and watched that. Andre. Like Andre 3000. Andre 3000 music. It's going great. Their smoothie business is going great.
And he's making a graph to find out how many smoothies.
So, we're going to make a graph. So, on a graph, what are the first things that we always do to make a graph? If somebody says, hey, make a graph, what's the first thing you're going to do on your paper? What are those lines called?
The X and Y.
The X and Y axes. So, on your graph paper, please go ahead and make an X and Y axis. Now, the other thing you want to think about, am I using positives, negatives? What values am I using? Well, for smoothies and days, I'm just going to use positives for both. So when we look at the graph, we have these different quadrants, and actually the quadrants are labeled in an odd way. They start with 1 at the top. Well, these are Roman numerals. Its first quadrant is top right. Then second goes counterclockwise. All you really need to know right now is working in the first quadrant is positive for both. So positive x, positive y values. So as we move on, we see the graph that he started. What do you notice he did with his graph? He had those axes that we talked about. We talked about something else last Thursday. I know we took Friday off. We were doing outsiders. What else does his graph have that ours doesn't? Alex? Labels. So we're always going to label our axes. Now his graph is actually missing something. It's missing something, and there's something really, I mean, it looks really nice, right? His graph looks really good. All those dots are perfectly lined up on those lines. So, actually, I want your group to talk about 2 things, and this goes a little bit beyond what their question asks. 1, is this graph right? And if not, what's wrong with it? How could we fix it? And 2, what are we still missing? What does the graph not have? So is the graph right? What are we missing? Hint, hint, you're going to be graphing your own. So that is normally an indicator that can help you out knowing what direction you're headed. Take like 3 minutes at least. I'm going to highlight something on the TD to remember when you go to make your graph. So be careful when you start making your graph. You want to look at what your task is, what your objective is. So somebody in your group hopefully should be able to say why I highlighted that and how that's going to affect when you make your graph. I'll slide that down on the TV. Those of us who are visually impaired. So show where on the graph you would expect to place a data point for day 20. Let's answer a couple of the first questions. Can anyone tell me what the graph is missing? Straight up what we don't have. Matt? Yeah, so he hasn't labeled the origin point, but we don't always have to. We like to, but we don't actually have to. Alex? Title. There's no title on the graph. Now, we know what he's graphing, but still, we always title our graph. Then what's wrong with this? What is wrong with this graph? So I take 1 step, and I've gone 3. I take another step, and I go 2. I take another step, and I go 5. Then I take another step, and I go 10. And then I take another step, and go... Thank you, Alan. This is not correct. What should be happening with every step I take? Well, not patterns. Equal distances, right? Every box going up should be worth the same thing. What should be happening as I step out to the right down the x-axis? Or up the x-axis, I guess. I went 3, then I went 1, then I went 2, then I went 3, then 1. Same thing. So, can anyone explain what Andre did? Patrick?
He did it like the fast one. It's like
How did he choose his numbers?
He chose them for me. He chose them by like saying like day 12. He put day 3 at the bottom, and then he didn't like go. He didn't separate like 1, 2, 3, 4.
But why did he pick 3, 4, 6, 9, 10, 12?
That's what he had.
Ah, he just labeled the data values that he had. We need to space our intervals evenly and then find those locations. Can anyone give us a tip as we start our graph, what to be careful of, why I highlighted what I highlighted? Why do we care about day 20? How's that going to affect making our graph? Marvin? Monica, you look like you know. You know? Why did I highlight day 20? It's not on his graph. And if we want to be able to make a prediction about day 20, we'll get you in a group in just a second. Again, with absences and stuff. We want to be able to show day 20. Okay, so go ahead and take a couple minutes to make your graphs. We're going to need to show day 20.
Because we have a weird number today, wherever you want to join up with, just be the 5th, and we'll grab you a chair. Let me see if I can get a chair from Goldman.
So be careful with your x-axis. Both axes should be scaled evenly, and we want our x to get to 20. Music. So when you guys catch up, Allie, with what we're doing? We haven't written much.
Excuse the interruption. Please have all choir students to the front lobby. Please put your stuff in your locker and meet you by the doors. Thank you.
Now we may be remaking our groups, which I knew was going to happen depending on who are our choir people. Choir people have fun at your rehearsal. It's always fun to be on stage, getting the practice. Yeah, we will review some of this tomorrow. We'll have our teammates probably catch us up and let you know what you missed. If we have 3 still, we're okay. Any group dropped down to 2, that's no good, but 3s are okay.
I guess they don't need it.
Alright, well, especially now that we lessened down. Why did I put here need to get to 38 or more? I may start using cards just because, especially now that there's less of us, it'll be easier for us to like not talk. We'll just like hide behind the fact that there's 5 minutes left. Zoe is still here. Oh, your group dipped down to 2. Shoot. We'll move here in a minute if we need. Zoe, why do you think I put need to get to 38 or more? Now, they don't have to have the same scale. We can, if you want to, you totally can. That's an option. I have my data table, which actually I should scroll back up to on the TV. I have my data table, and it only goes to 38. Right now, so why would I think I might need to go higher than 38? Francesca?
Well, normally a number can't exactly get to 38. It's kind of a number that normally isn't being able to get to. So if you use a smaller number that can go higher than 38 but still be able to have 38, that's better.
So I might end at like 40 as opposed to end at 38. Now, 38 corresponds to what day? What x value? Alice? 12. And if I decide that my x's need to go to 20, do you think my y might need to go higher than 38 since my days are going to go an extra 8? So, how we scale our axes, and this will be different depending on your paper and how big you made your graph. Days is easy. We know it needs to go to 20. So I count how many boxes I have to work with, and I scale based off that. I'm guessing I have at least 10 to work with here. So if I scale by 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, I can make it to 20 pretty easily. Anyone tell me what they chose to scale their y-axis with? I saw some people's graphs. They were good. Like Liam, I looked at yours. Liam went by 5s. Now, Liam, when I walked by, this was interesting. So sorry, I want to pick on you for a second. When I walked by, Liam was moving his x-axis because he had marked 5 right here. What'd you say? You messed up. Why? Where should 5 go? What is this bottom one? 0 pretty much no matter what. So that 5 should go up. Now this is going to be red. It's okay. I'm going to shift this whole thing slightly up to look a little bit cleaner. So this is our 0, just like actually down here was our 0. Then 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Now I pretty quickly run out of space. I can only make it to 40. That might be a problem once I'm trying to predict day 20. Annika? You went by 6. How high did that let you get? So I still don't know if that's high enough. They might be doing really well by day 20. I can go by like 7 or 8. Those are kind of hard to work with. Patrick? We could go by 10s. I could also make my graph bigger, right? If I have the opportunity, if I have paper to work with, I could extend my y-axis up higher. So, just for fun, let's go by 10s, just to make sure we can fit it on here. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. I have no idea what they'll be at for day 20. So whatever you went by, plot your points. So my first couple are going to be a bit tough to graph because I have day 3 and 3 smoothies sold. So that 3 smoothies sold is going to be pretty low down here. Day 4, 5 smoothies sold. Halfway between the axis and the 10. Day 6, we sold 10. Day 9, we sold 20. Day 10, we sold 28. Almost to 30 there. Day 12, we sold 38. Now, we talked last week, really briefly at the end of class on Thursday, about how we could predict the bitty bat. Right? We were talking about an itty-bitty little bat that we were trying to predict. I forget if we were predicting wingspan, right? Yeah. So we knew the X value, right? We knew its height or body length or whatever they were calling that. How do we do that here? And there's actually a poster in the room from the other class that you can kind of cheat from. So Marvin, what do we make? You're pointing at it. You guys talked about this in science too. The line of best fit. You guys have done a little bit of this in science, right? Putting the line through the data points where you will be. Maybe I'm spoiling things right now. My apologies if I'm spoiling things. So take your ruler. Just right there something. Now this is when having a see-through ruler is really beneficial. So if you don't have a see-through, I grab one for now just to figure out like why I'm saying it's beneficial. Anyone need one? I'll throw one at you. They don't throw very easy. Oh, wow. I feel like I'm at like a sporting event. And you get a ruler, and you get a ruler. Zoe's like, I don't know if I should ask for one. I'm sitting too close. Alright, and we can share. So I only have like a couple rulers left. Now, don't do this with my rulers. Here's advice though. You have your binder, right? And the ruler won't fit. But your ruler has hole punches. If you buy a cheapo ruler, or if you have an old one, or whatever, snap off an end, keeping the holes that you need so you can clip it in. I used to break my rulers in half. But you need the holes, so don't break off all your holes. Okay. Anyone remember how we draw this line? How I choose where my line's going to be? How do I choose it? Alex? We want to try to get the same points under as there are over. Now sometimes though, if my steepness doesn't quite fit, like that steepness seems to fit for the first few days, but then my behavior changes pretty dramatically. Sometimes we move the entire line. That. This is when the smartboard has to guess what I'm doing. So if I start my line somewhere else, and actually it would go through to the axis like that. Sometimes we move the entire line to make it fit. So now I have 1, 2 above, 1, 2 below, going through 2 of them. However, you can best manipulate your line to try to get it to go through the data the best way. Hey Nathan, if you're going to do that with the ruler, you're not going to use your ruler in my classroom. So, however you manipulate your line. Now, this is where our answers will be slightly different from each other. Your line of best fit will be slightly different from each other. What would help us be able to make a better line? What would be beneficial to making the line better? Like if you were working with Andre, and you could ask him, what if he gave us some more data points? Like day 16, day 18, the more data that we have, the better we can make our line. So with just this data, this line, if you've not made your line, go ahead and do that. Day 20 would go up right here. And if I make this line continue out, I can make a pretty good prediction. That one went a little bit up. Now your graph might be different, which is fine, but draw your line of best fit. There's a bird. Sorry. Turn this off. My buddy who works for the state. Are you off today? It's Columbus Day. Happy Columbus Day. State workers have the day off. Oh. Now, if I made my line of best fit start at the origin, and I said that it couldn't not start at the origin, I said it had to start at the origin, then my line of best fit would look something probably more like that, right? Then my answer would be very, very different. But if I did that, my prediction for day 20 would barely be higher than day 12. And that doesn't really seem to match what's happening, right? We're increasing sales pretty steadily. People are catching on, they're buying our smoothies. So you want to try to make this make sense. So I almost titled, like when I wrote my lesson title in, I almost wrote like making graphs make sense, but I didn't want to write that much. Didn't want to make you guys write that much. So that's why I think the solid black line here is a better line of best fit. We're just trying to make it match the data. And then you could also have something in between potentially. So say you didn't start on the axis, but you weren't as dramatic as mine was. And then your prediction might be like 55, 58. Really anywhere between, what do you think a low end prediction would be? Like what would be too low? If somebody's like, oh, I predict day 20, they'll sell this many. And you're like, nah, man, they'll sell more. What would be too low? Patrick? Well, I mean, yeah, that'd be way too low. What if somebody said, I think we'll sell 40 on day 20? There's 8 days in between there, right? Between day 12 and day 20. There's 8 days. Look at some other 8-day gaps. Like from 3 to 10, that's almost 8 days. Or 4 to 12, that is 8 days. There's huge growth there. So you have to think about what makes sense. All right, let's move on to 122. We've probably taken too long on this problem. All right. So, Alex, over, you guys okay pair, or do you want to split and go to other teams? You're working all right. I mean, if you want to stay where you're at, you can. But yeah, if you decide you need more help for a task, feel free to send a spy or whatever to another team. By the way, this is funny. They always talk about Columbus, and there's a couple different Columbuses around the nation. But so choose a graph. I'll let you guys as pairs. Your whole team doesn't have to choose the same graph, but that's why it's weird that we have 3 groups of 3 now. Choose a graph that you'd like to represent. Either the distance compared to time, or the number of visits compared to dollars. So essentially choose a challenge, A or B. As your pairs, and my groups of 3, you might just want to, as a group of 3, choose a challenge. We won't do both. Choose challenge A or challenge B. I'll move it down to the other screen too. Now you do not have to fit any predictions or anything like that. You're just trying to model the data they gave you. Most of the time, this is not an all the time rule, but most of the time when we look at a table, we'll say X, Y. And that's just how we set up the table. We are going to talk more specifically about independent and dependent variables, but we normally say, well, we always say, Y depends on X. So what we're saying here is the travel time will depend on how far we have to go, which makes sense. The further I have to go, the longer it will take. Here we're saying the cost will be determined by the number of visits, which also makes sense. The more I visit, the more the cost. So, on A, who chose A? One group, two groups? All right, or three groups, okay. So for graph A, now let's assume for a while that we're starting 0, 0. Our origin will be 0, 0. And tell me what you made your graph go by. Actually, I'm going to switch back over to my graph paper. Anyone going to be bold, or should I use cards? So, of course, we would label our graph axes. Patrick, and I may not be able to come back to you again today.
For B
For B or
we did 20.
for A? Okay, we're not on B. On A, how did we scale our axes? How did you go by? And this may be different depending on who we are. Like how we made the choice. Kate, did you do A, Kate?
Yeah.
How'd you scale your axes?
Well, for x-axis, I did 2
By twos? So how high did you need to go for your x's?
20.
To 20? That's your y's, actually. So you might have switched your axes around. Y goes up and down. So for y, I would totally be down with going by twos. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. If that doesn't fit, I might just move it. Might give myself some extra graph. This is also why I would normally suggest don't put graphs all the way in the corner of your paper. Try to leave yourself some room to work. So 14, 16, 18, 20 then. So my x's, if that's the distance, the miles, how high does that need to go? What's the highest value? Yeah, like not even 5, right? Like 4.1, but if we make it to 5, that's good. So what could we go by then if we only have to make it to 5? Well, we could go by 1s.
Yeah, I did like 1 and 1.5.
Ooh, now can I go 1 and then 1.5 here? So if I need to start out with 0.5. So we always want to show our first box with what scale we chose. So if Kate chooses 0.5 there, for the scale of the x-axis, every gap is going to be 0.5. So then 1, and then I don't have to label all the halves, but we want to show the first one to show how much it's worth. And then we plot our points. But I'm going to hope that we can plot our points. If we're having issues with that, we will work on that tomorrow probably a bit more. So for part B, part B's got some bigger values. So I'm not surprised that some people decided they'd rather go with part B. But it doesn't really make a difference. It's all just perspective. So who can tell me how you did part B? Anyone not Patrick? Who did part B? Or challenge B? Nathan, how'd you scale your axes?
I put on the x-axis, I put 0, 18.
Ooh, you scaled by 18. Okay,
Or,
well, you went 6 for the first gap? What do you have to get to at the top? What does your x go up to? 120. Or like 114, right? So almost 120. If I go 6 for every box, will that get me to 120? So I might need to go bigger. Even if I think 10 for each box, 10, 20, 30, 40. Man, is there a way that I can scale my axis that is just a real easy trick? Like just a tiny little math that I could do that will do my thinking for me. If I don't want to do this thinking, anyone remember what I'm guiding you to? Alan?
Do 114 divided by 18?
go to page 36 in your book, whoever's got a book close to you. 36 in the math notes box. It tells us exactly how to do this work. What is the value that you need to go up to? Well, here goes up to 114. Or if we want to make the math easy, 115, 120. Round it to something close that we're fine to work with. Sure, 120, easy to work with. Apparently gravity's extra strong up here. Then, how do I choose what I divide by? Look at that box. How do I choose what I divide by? I know I need to go up to 120 because that's about how many visits I need to graph. Alex? How many boxes? So on your paper, this might be different than on my paper. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Mine works out real easy and gives me 10. But what if I only had 11 here, or 10, or 9, or a weird number? If this comes out awkward, just round it to something you'd rather work with. Easiest thing to do, round it up. So if this was like a 9.5, I'd round up to 10. If it was like a 10.4, I'd round up to 11. I would just always round up. Or make it even, something easier to work with. So that tells me make each of these 10, 10, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, and I make it to 120. Yours might be different, but take how high you need to go, divided by the boxes that you have on your paper. So, I'm telling you, gravity today. The y-axis, to figure out the scaling here, how high does that y value need to go in this situation? For your cost in dollars, what's the highest value? What's the highest cost on the table? Okay. 149, right? So round that to 150. Make your life easy. Then, you on your paper, depending on how much space you have, how many boxes do you have? I've got about 10, maybe more, but 10's easy for me to work with. One thing I could always do is just make my graphs 10 by 10s. And you'll get pretty good at like visualizing 10 boxes on your paper. So if I have to go and, what?
I did 50.
You did 50? Like 50?
Yeah, from, I scaled the y-axis.
By 50s?
Yeah.
And you only went like 50, 100, 150?
Yeah.
So that then, be careful. So that works, right? You can fit your data on there, but did you use very much of your graph?
No.
So all your points are going to be very, very tight together. The reason we do this, the reason we do the division, is so that we use all of our graph that we have to work with. So this is going to tell me to use a scale of 15. If I use that scale of 15, that would be 30, 60, 90, and then 120, 150. All of my data fits because I make it up to 150, and I will use my whole table. Does that decision make sense? Do me a favor. Dog ear, fold over the corner of page 36. Like, fold it down and fold it down on itself again. Don't fold multiple pages together, but one page, fold that down, fold it down again so it's kind of thicker. Come back to that page. If you forget how to do that, dog ear it so you can come back to it. Notice I posted my book. All right, let's look at 123 together. We are out of time. We have like a minute left. Oh, man. We'll probably pick up 123 tomorrow to review with our teams what we're doing, but I don't want to start this. We'll only have like a minute. Alright guys, thank you very much. Try the homework. You should be able to do it. Remember page 36 for the little trick of scaling your axes. My best advice, make every graph you make a 10 by 10. Makes your life easy. What'd you say, dude? No, something like on graph paper. Let's say I'm making my graph starting out from right here. 10 boxes. So you'd be able to fit like 6 per page probably. So like that would be a 10 by 10. That's how big. So then I can take however many I need, like however tall I need to go, divide by 10. However far out I need to go, divide by 10. But it also depends on what numbers you have to start with, depending on how like easy this will be or how difficult it will be. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Hey Mike, I'll send out an email to the staff that I am not going to be available during extensions.
Thank you, that'd be sweet.
And I'll do map counts. And
I appreciate that a lot. I have everything. So we only had 4 people show up. If you want to go ahead and have it already. So I told those people that we would do this